This is going to be an interesting discussion, not least because it involves a very thorny issue at the heart of everything we've been discussing today. Needing the money is one thing, knowing where to get it is another. Actually getting it, that's the bit where most people get stuck. We're going to be talking about the keys to unlocking the capital that Africa needs for its development. And there is something that all of you have in common on this panel today when it comes to the AFC. Each of you, in one way or another, was key to unlocking the future of the AFC. And if we can start with you, Your Excellency. You made the bold move, the bold decision 15 years ago to sign off on the creation of a Pan-African financial institution. Today, of course, it's the AFC. It's managed to do so much. What are the decisions that you made in order to bring this into fruition? How difficult was that to do?
Thank you very much. Well, I want to thank you for bringing Chukwuma Soludo on my right hand, because I cannot give the genesis on all that without him giving the, if you like, the supporting aspect of it. Now, I will have to go back a little bit. When I came into government, we were debt-ridden, really debt-ridden. And we had a reserve of $3.7 billion. And we were servicing our debt annually by $3.5 billion without the quantum of debt going down. That was just to service the debt. We are not paying any of the any part of the principal. And the first thing we tried to do was to build up our reserve. Before we came in, when we budgeted annually and we said that we will be selling oil for $30 per barrel, and we sold for 35. The 30, the 5 on top, the 35, everything we eat up. At that time, we ate it up. But then we came up with this idea of what we call excess crude, which means that if we budgeted for 30 and we sold at 35, nothing will touch that 5. That 5 is set aside. It's not even put into reserve so that we won't spend it. It's put aside. Now, we did that. Our reserve was going up. What we call excess crude was going up at the same time. Then we faced another thing, the debt. As I said, we were paying $3.5 billion to service the debt. And that was not good enough. So what can we do? I went around the world and we eventually got to debt relief. And we paid about 12 billion, I think, or out of, anyway, we were owing about 36 billion, and we paid 12, 18. And then that was what they call Paris Club. Then we went to London Club. Again, we got something. So our debt the quantum of our debt came down to under 4 billion. All right, so we've done very well for debt, and we were able to pay off. The reserve was growing, and the reserve got to about 62 billion until we took the money to pay the debt and all that. Then Chukwuma had an idea. Then Chukwuma was initially my economic advisor. I would say a bit of problem that I have to face, and you have to be patient with me, because when I finish this part,
we are here for you.
You will have not another. You won't have another one. Now, Chukwuma was a consultant, a very good one at that. He is not a particular fan of World Bank. Then I had, in my second term, I had a minister of finance who, of course, came from the World Bank. And we have one woman in the World Bank who is looking after Africa, called Kruger. I remember her name. And I remember her name very well because now when Kruger was coming to Nigeria, well, it's like a president of another country coming to Nigeria. So Kruger will come, and then Kruger will write back, and the letter is what you have seen, what we have to do, what you have to condemn us for, what you have to commend us for. Now, I will pass it to Chukwuma as governor of Central Bank. And if I leave Chukwuma to give me a draft reply, now World Bank will kill us. Then I will give a copy also to Ngozi. If I leave Ngozi to write the draft, then Nigeria will probably kill me. So I will ask Chukwuma to give me a draft, Ngozi to give me a draft, and I will take the two drafts and spend a night on it. Then when I finish with Chukwuma, I will say, Chukwuma, look, if I give you this thing to write, and if I follow what you have written, then World Bank will rub my face on the floor. So please, Chukwuma, learn this lesson. Never say no to World Bank, but never do their bidding. And that is the way we manage. So the next thing, Chukwuma came after we were trying to begin getting comfortable, was this consolidation of banks. Actually, that day, I think I was going to council meeting, and he came. He said, $200 million per bank. I said, why 200? 200 is not right. Let's not make it 250. And I think we make it 250.
No, 200.
Oh, 200. It was still 200. Well, maybe I wanted to make 200 and 250, and you make the case for 200. Anyway, we went into banking consolidation. And as we were finishing banking consolidation, there was another thing we did, banking consolidation. We moved from, I think, 87 banks to about 25 or 26 banks. They were strong. Then the Islamic Bank came, and the president of Islamic Bank came to say to me, look, we should invest. And I said, well, that's all right. We have some money in Africa Development Bank. We should take some money from there, which is what has accrued as interest from our investment. So we took 100 million and put in Islamic Bank. And then they said, look, I cannot have a permanent director. I said, no. Then I want a permanent director. I think they say I should bring in another 50 million. So I put in another 50 million, and we had a permanent director. And I don't know, we had a situation where we now had investment in Islamic Bank. We were doing well in African Development Bank. We are doing well in African Bank. And then, of course, our debt has been managed. Our banks, commercial banks are doing well. And then, of course, Chukwuma is never tired of coming with all sorts of problems and ideas. So one day he came again and said, well, there's this idea World Bank and all, African Union had been toying up with and all that. I said, well, what are you doing with what African Union have been toying with? Leave that. Then he said, let me explain to you. He explained to me. And after he explained, I said, well, go and put it in writing. I think that was the beginning. Maybe he will be able to tell the rest. But
so that's so now we have the inside story, how the AFC was born. It's fantastic to have that insight, because I think one thing it does show us is that it requires some innovative thinking to address current challenges. And Governor, if I can come to you to pick up.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. And thanks to Smiler and the AFC family for putting this together. 15-year-old child. It's an adolescent and growing. And I think when I look back and go back in time, it's as if it happened yesterday. And I want to especially thank I don't just say former president, my boss. I learned under the feet of the master. And if you see me doing whatever we do today, we were just reminiscing a few moments ago. The AFC is a summary, in my view, a metaphor for what Africa needs to move forward. We are the last in terms of the development frontier. And Africa cannot afford incremental organic growth. We've got to be running at the speed of 1,000 kilometers per hour, even if others are now going at 100 or 200. It will require heavy, serious disruptive thinking, and, if I might say, extraordinary execution for it to happen. And this is what AFC, in my view, summarizes. This is the whole history of it. I think after the 10th anniversary, quite a number of people, the former US ambassador and a whole lot of others were urging me to write the story. And Dele Olojede, that's him, Dele? Yeah, came and the AFC commissioned a book. And I was asked to write the chapter on the founding of the AFC. And so we put it all down, but I haven't seen the book. So if you, AFC, Smile, I don't know where the book is. Because if with that, we don't even need to go through this background about the dates, what happened, and so on and so forth. But let me say something in tribute to our president, because what Africa needs, you need leadership. You need leadership. You need leadership. You need a team that is capable, a vision, and then, of course, execution. A execution, because, I mean, however fantastic the dream is, without execution is hallucination. And now, in this case, just like the president said, following the successful consolidation of the banks, the next big thing was then to have the real sector across Africa to be enabled, energized. But they weren't going to be energized with a short-term finance from the commercial banks. You needed a financial infrastructure to provide long-term financing to be able to unlock the opportunities in the private sector of Africa, and the infrastructure. So, on the fateful morning of 13th February, I remember like yesterday, I went to Baba again. This is the president who, and your third sentence, he grasped the idea, extremely, very smart. 22 minutes, I was explaining to him about this, that the African Union had for 25 years wanted to set up the African Investment Bank with headquarters in Tripoli, Libya, but they couldn't do that. And that we now needed to do a PPP, a public-private partnership, leveraging again on the reserves that we were then building at the central bank. And of course, we amended the CBN Act subsequently to provide for the possibility that we could leverage on our reserves to unlock the opportunities in infrastructure. And as we explained this, he said, now he got it. Because, you know, in his small room, you sit next to him. Once he gets it, he will tap you. He will just hit you. Yes. Let's go on. Go on. You need, very rarely, you find leaders like this who gets it. He was, and still is, in extreme haste to get Africa moving. And that's why I say Africa is in a haste to move. And just like we're today at the Transcorp, at some other day I will tell you the story about Transcorp. How I went to him as well with an idea about us creating the equivalent of South Korean chaebol, you know, to become a, a mega thing for us to get to the world. And he said, something like transnational corporation. I said, yes. Tap me again. Bye. Picked the phone, called his chief of staff, Abdul, that was coming over, and we convened a meeting of who was who. 60 of them were invited, 56 came, and at the executive council chambers, the committee headed by Ndi Okereke came to now craft the details for setting up the Transcorp was born. It took minutes for this to come. And when the idea of AFC was also discussed, and he quickly grabbed it, said, on the next day, 14th, I came with a memo suggesting 9 names to constitute the steering committee with myself as the chair. On the spot there, he just grabbed it, approved. That's what he said. We went to work. We wanted to work with the 9, then realized, no member of the commercial bank was there. And then decided to co-opt 5 of them, including the Tony Elumelu, the Tayo Aderinoko, and several others of Access, and then Our Lady, Ibru, and Co. 5 of them. Co-opted 5 of them into the committee. And we went to work. Hired KPMG as our financial advisor. And we went to work, produced the blueprint. And at some point, kept briefing him. And at some point, of course, he approved there to authorize me and the central bank to take every step necessary to get it done. And we kept briefing him, and he was like, run. At some point, he had to give me a presidential jet. We traveled to London, New York, raising funds. I took a presidential jet, and we're doing, roadshow, 1 country per day. And we traveled to about 22 African countries in 27 days to raise the money to set up the AFC. And as we got on to this, so that in 15 months, that which the African Union couldn't do in 25 years, just the month that he left office, from February to May of the following year, signed the headquarters agreement. We constituted the board of AFC with myself as the founding chairman, and so on and so forth, of course. And in between this, and this is another lesson for us, in not just having disruptive thinking with execution capacity, but never feel shy, or fear that you might make mistakes. You are going to make mistakes if you want to do big things. We made some mistakes here and there, especially in hiring the first CEO. But then, if you make a mistake, be clinical. And I was very clinical. Got him out, and we hired Andrew. And he came, and AFC began to move. We're very clinical about it because we couldn't stop. You fall, you get up, you keep running. When the next his successor came in, some other conspiracy theories came. This is Obasanjo's thing. Transcore. And this Soludo. It is this Soludo a Transcore. And Obasanjo Transcore. Soludo, Obasanjo, AFC. There must be what is behind it, by the way. There was concerted effort to kill Transcorp, concerted effort to kill AFC. I can tell you it took an arm and a leg. I think all the gray hair I developed was developed in 4-6 months, fighting for the life to save the baby, because they had the baby on the slaughter to kill. And sometimes he will call me and say, what is going on? I say, Baba, it's politics, so. But we will survive. And finally, AFC survived. And today, it's 15 years old. And so when I look back and I say, it's part of the African condition. And so the lesson, the moral here is that there will be difficulties. In Africa here, to get something phenomenal done, you need the kind of leadership that only our President Obasanjo could provide. Because he's true like a rock of Gibraltar. You come to him with ideas that he thinks, 3 minutes, he grasps it. 3 minutes, he just gets it. And the next time he's actually explaining it to you, you'll be wondering whether it's the same thing that you said to him. And so on. So, Baba, on this 15th anniversary, I will celebrate the AFC, celebrate Andrew. Of course, Asamoah, who was at that initial team, he was the deputy, and was part of that early stage. But he held forth before Andrew came on board. And then Samaila, I think, as I see the trajectory, now with over 10 billion disbursements so far, and in about 35 or so countries in Africa, touching tens and hundreds of millions of lives, I can only say the next century is Africa's century. But for that to happen, we need many, using AFC as a metaphor, 1,000 more of such disruptive changes. And teams that believe in Africa, leadership that believes in Africa. And may God give us many, many more President Obasanjos in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor. You've thrown up many interesting questions there, because as you talk about execution being key, there are challenges within the African context. I was just attending a conversation about the pipeline in Uganda, and they were talking about how it can be difficult to manage what the politicians need to take home to their people as a message, and what the investors want to do and take back to their shareholder. Mr. Ali, if we can come to you. You've been commended as the first CEO of the AFC, but you've been investing on the continent for more than 20 years. What have you seen in terms of the major tensions that need to be managed, much in the way that has been described, but also what are the future trends? Because it's important for the past to inform us, but this conversation is very much also about looking to the future.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be on the same stage as the real founding fathers of AFC, and it's also great to see the trajectory that the corporation has taken in the years since I left. To try and answer your question, I think that any investment, whether it's in Africa, whether it's anywhere else, any project is about balancing different risks, different rewards, different interests. And honestly, there's really nothing rocket science about that. But on the other hand, there's no one-size-fits-all answer. But what I would say is that it's very important to have the right people who are working on these things. And our founding fathers have talked about it from the top. But I'll talk about it from the bottom, which is the team that we had in AFC. And, quite honestly, nothing that we achieved in AFC was achieved without, the impact of the team that we had. And, one of the great things about the organization was that we could attract, through both the vision and the resources we had, literally the best people in the world to do this work. And I'm pleased to say that those literally the best people in the world, a good 80–90% of them are African. So we have the talent to do this, but it's a question of finding the talent, incentivizing that talent, and the good thing about AFC was, yes, we paid well, but the real incentive was the mission of AFC, building Africa, and then unleashing that talent, and that is, I think, one of the things we were able to do. Looking forward, I think that, one of the things that, and I think His Excellency Governor, too many excellencies on this stage, but His Excellency the Governor said that in a way AFC is a metaphor for how to move Africa forward, and I fully agree with that. One of the things is really around building institutions. A lot of the I was at the World Bank Group and other things, and a lot of what we did, and it's all good, was around building projects. So we'd build a power station here, a dam there, whatever. But, that project is done, and then you have to start almost from square one. But if you build an institution that can then replicate other projects, that is really how you start to develop capacity on the continent. And thank you. And that's what AFC has been doing. So the AFC investment in Arise, which I think has been spoken about here, for example, I think is a good example about that. And building these African institutions that can draw in talent, draw in investment, and find solutions is very important. The other thing, just to say, I think that is also important, and again is a little bit embodied in AFC, is that African money needs to be mobilized to solve African problems. The initial capital of AFC was essentially all African. We found $1 billion on the continent and put into this thing. It was only once AFC got off the ground, then it started to raise funding from other people. But because we had that catalytic capital, we were able to raise that funding, and I see AFC has even done, way beyond what we managed to do then, largely on our own terms. And that then gave us the flexibility to do other things. And so, so some of the initiatives that AFC is doing, also things like the InfraCorp initiative that Nigeria is doing, I think are very important. Final point is, again, you can see this in AFC, is also the intellectual leadership. If, you don't set the frame or the framework of what you're doing intellectually, somebody else is going to come and do it for you. That's why I think the white paper on this COP is very important. Because, we are now setting the framework of how we want to do it, and it's not other people who are going to tell us what to do. There'll be a negotiation and we won't get everything that we want, but at least let us have some targets and let us know what we're doing. That thought leadership, I think, is very important in essentially every sphere in which we're doing, because if you're not, to quote Warren Buffett, if you're playing poker and you don't know who the sucker is, then you are probably the sucker. So, we shouldn't be the sucker, we should be setting the tone of what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ali. Mr. Asamoah, we'll come to you because Mr. Ali has talked about the importance of using African money to solve African problems. The reality is still there's a lot of reserves belonging to Africa outside of Africa. A lot of money sitting in US treasuries, for instance, that could be mobilized on the continent. When it comes to mobilizing that capital, what are the important things that we need to do to de-risk investments, to make this this $1 trillion of investment that's available in asset management, make some of that come to the continent?
Thank you very much. And let me also add my thanks for the invitation to be here. I am the CEO of the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, the sovereign wealth fund in Ghana. And the parallels between setting up the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund and the AFC are striking. I was the first, as mentioned, number 2 at AFC at the beginning. And let me just add something very quickly. From a staff member's perspective, I was working in South Africa at the time, and I got a call that they're trying to establish a new institution to do infrastructure across the continent, headquartered in Lagos, with $1 billion worth of capital. It was like a dream come true for a youngish, ambitious African investment professional. And then when we got here, and we find, as Andrew said, the capital was all African. The board was all African. The chairman was African. The strategic stakeholder was the Central Bank of Nigeria. It gave us the flexibility and the confidence to be able to look at problems from an African perspective. I grew up and I worked in IFC and other institutions. Again, it was nice to be able to have an institution that was owned by us, looking at our perspective of solving those solutions. And a couple of things that really stood out and which lead into the question that you asked. The first thing is, if we can maintain excellence, technical excellence in the way that we do our investments, it will send such a powerful message to the rest of the world and other people. The second thing is that we mustn't lose the vision, which is ultimately to improve the lives of our people in Africa. We must be making a difference. And if you can combine those two things with the strong support of African capital, I really believe there's nothing that we can't achieve. So when I was asked to join the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund and head that up, I drew on all of my lessons that I learned and I trained in AFC. And it's allowed us to shape a path in the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. We're many, many years away from achieving what AFC has done, but the steps that we're trying to follow, we're trying to emulate. And I really believe that AFC has set a path across the continent that is admired and respected throughout the continent and even wider in the rest of the world. And that's the way that you get international funding. They will come and partner in AFC. If AFC is doing a transaction with the credibility that AFC has, it makes it much easier for that credit person in Washington, D.C. or New York to say, let me bring my funds. We know the track record of AFC. If they're alongside us, we'll work with them.
That is a fantastic point. You have to, well, as Andrew was saying, not only do you have to know if you are the sucker at poker, you have to know how to play poker, and understanding geopolitics and the way the world works and working with that rather than against it is a very good thing to do. If I can come back to you, Your Excellency, one of the things you said at the 10th anniversary of AFC was, this is great because so many projects end up dead on arrival, and this one didn't. Why do you think we still have so many projects in Africa that end up dead on arrival? What can we do about that? Because most times the problem isn't the plan or the vision, it's the execution.
It's on. It's on.
Thank you. Well, let me tell you what was happening here. When I won election as a democratically elected president, I still used to have an ADC, a military man, standing behind me. Then there's this little girl, I think it's about 4-year-old. So he used to ask her parents, but you say we now have a civilian government. Then the parents will say, yes, but what is that man standing behind the president in uniform? What is he doing? So the parents couldn't satisfy her, explaining to her. So one day they came to me and said, look, we have this problem in our family. This little girl. Oh, I said, well, little girl, what do you want to know? He said, what is that soldier always standing behind you? What is he telling you? I say, he's telling me what to say. Well, Chukwuma has just told me what to say. No, I think the question you ask is very, very relevant. And from what Chukwuma said, what I said, and what Andrew particularly said, you can see why many projects fail. From what I said, Chukwuma brought an idea. I bought the idea. But when I bought the idea, it ceased to be Chukwuma's idea. I stole it from him. Then I drove it. But as I was driving it, I was carrying him along. Go out, here is plane, because if you have to go through Africa in 27 days, 22 countries, it will take you 2 months. Yeah. Because you have to go to Europe and come down and all that. So here is plane, go. Now, there's that drive. Do you have the drive to get a project, no matter how good it is, off the ground and run with it? Run, literally run with it. That's number one. Number two, continuity. And as you heard, we nearly got AFC
And even transport.
and Transcorp. We nearly got them killed by my successor. And what they are saying is they got the railway not to continue, because if we have been able to get the railway going the way we managed to get AFC and Transcorp going, the situation will not be what it is today. Now, that continuity, and they have, and there's no reason why you shouldn't. Why did Obasanjo? And as you heard, it took us about 15 months before we get to the point of getting it going. Oh, the month is going, or a month before he was going, he now he signed this, or he established this. What is in it for him? What is in it for Soludo? They even went with the railway, they went to China and said, look, what you are going to give us loan, how much of this loan is bribe for Obasanjo? And the Chinese said, are you well? How can we give loan and include in that loan bribe for anybody? So continuity, and that is very, very important. Now, if he had left at the time I left, probably AFC will have been dead and buried by now. So continuity. Then, as Andrew said, you need, and I learned that when I was president, you need the driver at the top, but you also need the people who make things happen immediately following. So you have that in him, in Andrew when he came. They are very important. And he said, it's a team. A team. Yes, I can bulldoze, but if I bulldoze and he doesn't follow, whatever I have bulldozed, the land I have bulldozed, we overgrown with weed sooner or later, sooner than later, and then you have somebody. So it is this issue, and I want to emphasize the point made by Andrew. We have to get that initial money. It has to be there. It has to be there. And we did it with AFC, as he said. We raised money in Africa.
That's an extraordinarily important point.
When I called a summit for HIV/AIDS, and Kofi Annan came here and suggested global fund, I put in $10 million. $10 million. Bush Jr. launched it with $200 million. And he invited me to Rose Garden. And when I was going back or coming back to Nigeria, I went through Europe, and the Europeans said, hey, how much did he put in? I said $200 million. They say I should go back and tell him that he forgot 1 0 behind. But that money, with that money, 10 million that I put, 200 million that Bush Jr. put, raised over $45 billion.
I think that's such a crucial point to make, Your Excellency. We have to believe in the dream before we ask other people on board to join us in it. Excellencies.
I want to just 1 second on this. This is a very important.
Okay, Governor, we'll give you exactly 1 second because I'm getting the evil eye.
Okay.
I have a big announcement.
Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I think the point that His Excellency addressed is a very, very pertinent one. Part of the problem in Africa, especially in the public sector, let me be very blunt about it, is that You see, is this question the point that he made, what is in it for me, or what is in it for him? Many valuable projects have been killed just on account of that. And I want to tell you, AFC was going to die for that purpose. Two things. Part of the inquiry after you left was that people thought, come on, there is no way they would have gone into this Soludo. There must be. And in fairness, I must say, at the last meeting of the steering committee at Eco Hotel, Aliko, who was a member, did propose that I should be given what is called sweat equity. That I should be given sweat equity. Having worked like this, and it's a public-private sector thing and so on. And I said to the steering committee, no, thank you. This is not driven by what I will get. It is driven by a public purpose. And in setting up this, Andrew is here, I'm glad he's on this panel. You realize that other than the board, after the decision to hire him, not one day did I call him as chairman of the board to say, here is this person you have to hire. Or I recommend that you hire this. Probably if I did as chairman with the board and you've just signed his appointment letter, I might, okay, let's try to accommodate. But not one day. Because what was driving us was this public purpose that Africa must be. And what I want to say is that, and this is the same thing with our president. In all that we did, all the projects, all the special programs we came up with, and he said, run, run, run. Not one day did Mr. President say to me to begin to ask, is there, what can we, or whatever, or begin to tell you who to put and who not to. This is the bane of many public sector projects in Africa. Once people get in there and they begin to think, what is it going to be for us? If it's not public purpose, if it's about what is in it for us, then forget it. It will never go. And my response, I must say now, in full disclosure, and that ECO meeting, I said, if AFC builds the Fourth Mainland Bridge or God's death and so on, I will be satisfied. I said, maybe when I leave office, someday, they might also be helping to finance my own, if I have something to satisfy them. And I think something like that may be happening. But you still have to go through the eye of the needle with Samaila there looking with four eyes and so on. Thank you very much. I think it's really a great pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nancy, I'm standing here for a purpose because I have a powerful illustration of what you've just heard. We're going to very briefly announce AFC's $2 billion economic resilience facility. That's the sign of AFC's intentions in Africa. This is the launch of a $2 billion facility targeted African FIs to support Africa's economic resilience and recovery. To make that announcement, I call on the head of Treasury and Financial Institutions for AFC, Banji Fehintola.
Thank you, Mark, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As we all know, in the last 2 to 3 years, Africa has grappled with so many challenges. COVID, we all know what happened. More recently, we've had the issue of Russia, Ukraine. And since the beginning of the year, it's been very turbulent time in the financial markets generally. Today, so many people have spoken about, the pricing, all the problems we face in the capital markets. And all these things have significant implications for our economies. When capital is leaving the continent, multilateral development banks like AFC need to step up and play a very significant counter-cyclical role. And it's against that backdrop that on the 1st of April, during our stakeholder event in Lagos, the president and CEO of AFC, Samaila Zubairu, made an announcement of AFC providing support through an African Economic Resilience Facility. The facility is $2 billion in total. AFC is committing on its own to fund at a minimum $1 billion of that. Thank you. And more importantly, we want to use our network and our strong investment grade rating to mobilize the balance from the rest of the world. And since this news went out, I've got many calls from partners around the world who want to partner and use our platform to also intermediate and provide capital to the continent. And I think that's the kind of value that AFC brings in this discussion. The facility itself will be disbursed through financial institutions across the continent, so be it commercial banks, regional development banks, central banks. And the whole intention is that as people apply for this facility, we would, again, one of the mantra in AFC is speed. We would, as a matter of urgency, process those applications online. It's going to be online through our website. We would process those applications through our investment process with a very speedy turnaround time, because the developmental work ahead of us is urgent. And at AFC, we really feel that the continent needs a lot of urgency in the deployment of capital. Earlier on, we hosted a lunch where we discussed this, but I'm proud that we're making this announcement here at the plenary. And we certainly look forward to partnering with everyone of you, any financial institution, funding partner, whatever it is that you're interested in helping Africa to build a more resilient economy. We're looking forward to partnering with you in implementing this program. So thank you so much for listening, Your Excellencies, and we are here to continue the discussion. Thank you.